It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
Hey guys, how is it going? And welcome to the Morning Star Drive on 117.8. It is Wednesday, December 14th, and so happy for you joining us. We are ready to start another day together with the Lord. So subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on SoundCloud, and make sure to support us on Patreon. So today we have an exciting podcast for you. We have Health is Happiness, the foundational figures of Christianity word study, and of course commentaries, updates, and news on what is happening around the world in this history today. All right, everyone, how are you doing? And I hope you guys are having an amazing and awesome week. We've already reached the middle of the week. It is hump day. Don't forget, tomorrow is Q&A Thursday, so get those questions ready. Send them to me whenever you can. And if you haven't yet, leave a like and comment below to build our community. Just super happy for everyone joining us every weekday on the Morning Star Drive. So let's get up and support each other each and every day. This week's Sunday message title: it was done because there was absolutely God's will behind it. And of course, where there is a will, there is a way. Okay, so it is Wednesday, the middle of the week. A lot of things to think about to end this year. Well, if it's already the 13th, right? Is it the 13th or the 14th? It is the 13th, right? So tomorrow is the 13th. And no, today is the 13th, sorry. Today's the 13th, and it means that we got 12 days till Christmas, Jesus' birthday. So a lot to celebrate there. A lot of thoughts to think about what's, thinking about this entire year we've been through, how we came to this point, realizing how much God has given you and how much He's helped you, been with you this entire year so that you can make it this far. Some of us have had maybe a rougher year than others. Some of us have had a good year. Even now at the end of the year, if you look at everyone's life right now, some have gone through the end of the year. Some people are going through misfortune while others have been blessed for what they have done. So remember everyone, this is not a time to look at others and look down on those that have had misfortune or be jealous of those who have been blessed. We are all on the same path, and there will come a time when you are blessed and others go through misfortune. So make sure you always treat others really well. All right. So for me, I'm thinking about a couple things as the year is ending. And, you're going to reflect not only on this year, but, on many deeper things that stem from this year. And there's one thing that I have noticed. I have noticed something very interesting because, I'm very into social media because of my job. Well, my job is social media. It is YouTube and Instagram, Facebook. I'm everywhere right now. It's part of my job, right? And, I'm looking at, and I look at everyone's Instagrams. I look at everyone's YouTube channels and stuff like that too. It's very, very interesting because when I look at all this, I have a lot of different thoughts that come from it. For instance, this is one of the thoughts that I had. I think that leaders are held at a different standard than others. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, right? But they are being. I'm not saying that it's wrong to do so. But there's a different standard for leaders, right? And that's something that you cannot avoid. Like when I say leaders, I'm talking more so like head leaders and assistant leaders, like people up in those positions, right? So when it comes to social media, I was thinking about when it comes to social media, what we post, the things that we do, the actions that we take and we put onto social media, should a head leader, assistant leader, headquarters, or people in that area, should they be more conscious and not post whatever they want, okay? Like, of course, I'm not talking about doing something like very, very sketchy, but, just like kind of the difference between a regular member and a head leader or an assistant leader. Or should we hold them at the same standard? Should they be free, just like other members, right? So this kind of the things that I was kind of thinking about, like, okay, so here are leaders. They're human just like us. They're not that much better than us, but they've been put into a position where God has given them power and strength so that they can lead a church or whatever it is, right? Or lead an entire country. So I was thinking about a bunch of things when it came to head leaders and assistant leaders, mainly because I was one before, right? So should it be something that they should be able to post whatever they want, or should it be something where they are human just like everyone else and they shouldn't be as conscious about what others think, right? And this is something that I think everyone should think about too and be honest about it also. Like even if it isn't fair, like I would say that, for myself, I'm going to be very honest. I would hold my head leader or assistant leader at a different standard. I just would because of their position, right? Head leaders, assistant leaders, headquarters, whatever it is, they are constantly in the spotlight. They're under the microscope because they're leading a church. They're the ones that people look up to. Their image plays a huge role. And I do believe that there is something that people, like, if you're in that position, you should understand what that position is. And this is purely my opinion, right? So, I even thought to the point of, like, say, should a head leader or assistant leader be driving an expensive car? You know what I mean? Like say a BMW or a Mercedes-Benz. And then some of us might say, across the board, no way. There's no way they should drive that. But for me, when I think about it very reasonably, like, you might think to yourself, is there any reason why a pastor should drive a car like that? Like a head leader and stuff. And I'd be like, well, I think it really depends. I don't think it's very easy just to say that every head leader can't drive a nice car. You shouldn't be, like, any head leader, assistant leader should be driving this or that car. Like, for instance, let me give you some examples. What if the person comes from a wealthy family? Or what if they what if they were someone who used to work in the corporate world? They made a ton of money and they decide, you know what? This is not the life I want to live. I want to live in the church. I want to be someone who runs for God. And so they were already successful and wealthy before becoming a head leader, and then they transition over, they go through all the different things and they become a head leader, right? Would that be okay? Or, like, think about the difference between certain churches, right? Like, what if you're in a wealthy church and it's in an area where everyone is rich and affluent, right? Does it make a difference, like, if the church is in that type of area and all your congregation is very rich and affluent? And the answer is, I think it does. I think it does make a difference, right? Because, how bad would they feel if they're all these rich people and then the pastor's living in poverty? Right? It's very, very different because you're dealing with your congregation. The pastor's lifestyle has to be somewhat fitting of the area they are in. Like, let's example, what if you're in Dubai? Every person in your church is mega rich, right? It doesn't mean that the pastor has to be mega rich. It just means that they would have to somewhat fit the demographics and not be so much poorer than the congregation, or else it's very hard for them to talk to the pastor, right? You have to be, you have to be in a position where you're able to lead the people that are in your church, right? Or think about this. What if you are a pastor of a mega church, right? Like, a mega church in America is over 2,000 people. Like, regularly, your average attendance every Sunday is 2,000 or more, right? So imagine you have a church of 10,000 people. But interestingly, for a mega church, the industry standard for a salary for a pastor of a huge church of, like, a mega church is anywhere from $200,000 to $300,000 a year, which is like what, $20,000 to $30,000 per year, right? And from our perspective, it's like, oh my gosh, that's too much money. That's so ridiculous. But imagine if you're in a mega church, you're managing a church of that size. It's very, very different, right? Let me put it this way. Let's pretend, guys, that none of the bad stuff happened this year in 2023. Let's just pretend KJS did not fall from grace. Let's just pretend, okay? I know it's very hard to. And her salary was about $120K a year at the Lord's church, and for all the work she was doing with all the education stuff like this too. Now, if she didn't fall from grace, would you think that she didn't deserve it, or would you think she deserves more? If she didn't fall from grace. The only reason it becomes an issue is because she fell from grace, right? Honestly, right? The only reason we're even talking about or saying, oh, maybe that's too much, is because she fell from grace. And I don't think anyone who's in a church of like 30 to 50 people can complain and compare themselves to someone who's running a church of 2,500 people and say, why did they get 120,000? I only get 25,000. They're two completely different situations. You know what I mean? So, like, it's interesting because, I think of these things only because it happened this year. But also one thing I do recognize in Providence, I'm not sure if this is in the world too, is like, once this week's message came out about money and stuff, like, the rich, it's hard for the rich to enter heaven, stuff like this too. The one thing I do know about Providence people is that when we get a message like this, people tend to go super extreme. And then they say that money is bad and money is not important. We should all be starving and we should, head leaders shouldn't get like this. And it's kind of interesting because we do kind of get like that. We become very, very extreme. So that's why I'm kind of bringing this up is I don't want people to become, just because a message like this comes out and just because all this stuff happened this year, it doesn't mean that it's all bad. It means that we have to be very, very careful with this type of thing more than it's all bad. So even when I was thinking about this, social media is a big thing too. Like, how active should a head leader or assistant leader be in social media? And the first thing I thought to myself is I need to get out of my old thoughts because I'm from the old generation. And I have to think about this from a very modern perspective of this society and how this society runs. And social media is a norm. It's not a special situation that, it's so weird that a pastor is doing social. No. It's a norm. Pastors everywhere in the world use social media. They promote their churches. They give the message or the gospel to the people in their congregations through social media or to the general public. Social media is not something that I would look at and say that it's wrong or that church leaders should not do it. Why? Because it's part of society. It's part of the culture we have right now. But I would say that head leaders and assistant leaders and HQ and a lot of these people should be way more careful of what they post, I think. Let me give an example. Could you use social media like a regular member? And I would say no. That's my personal feeling, and I'll tell you why. And I'll tell you what Sunseem said, too, that kind of makes me think towards this way. He didn't say straight up, you can't do it, but some things that make me think about it, right? Like, you can't have the same social media habits as a regular member, and you can't think that it's not fair because I am human just like everyone else. No, you have to realize you took the position, and there are things that come with the position, right? Like, for instance, the moment you take a position of a high position in a church, you are not a regular member, but you are someone that is looked up to, and there is different expectations and different standards. What you post, what you say, what you do, I'm going to tell you right now, what you post and what you do rarely helps in your head leading. However, it can definitely hurt you and go against you if it's the wrong things, right? So the question is this really fair? And I thought to myself, I would say it's fair if you understood what it means to be a leader, right? Like, for instance, the same thing as if you want to be rich and famous, you need to understand you're not going to have privacy. I was listening to an interview with Ronaldo, Cristiano Ronaldo, the soccer player, and he's like, I can't go to the park with my kids because all of a sudden people start to gather, and then my wife fears, for the safety of our children and this and that. And it's something where it's like, oh my gosh, but he said that's part of the deal. Because I'm rich and famous, that's part of the deal. And I have to understand it. It's part of, I'm used to it now. Is it fair? Well, it comes with the territory. If you really, really want that, you take everything that comes with it, right? And that's why I would say it's fair too when you understand if you're in a high position in church. What does it mean to be a leader? A leader is not someone who can just do anything they want. A leader should care about what people think, especially in your congregation. I think they should. Because you are subject to the people in your congregation. What does that mean? I'm not saying that you have to listen and do everything your congregation says. Think about this. If you post or do something and the congregation loses respect for you, and then they come against you, once you lose your congregation, you're no longer a leader. Because the moment they stop respecting you, it also means they're not going to listen to you, right? And I'm talking about your full congregation. You can't say that, all the young people are cool with me, but not the old. No. It's the whole congregation. You have to ride the fine line. And it reminds me of a verse that Sunseem gave, which is John chapter 21, verse 18. And it says, very truly, this is Jesus speaking to Peter, very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. And Sunseem said this is about leadership. When you're younger, you're carefree. Do what you want. Do whatever. Say what you want. This is my life kind of thing, right? But when you get older or when you become a leader, Sunseem says it's different. You're not you can't just do whatever you want, right? You will stretch out your hands. What is clothing? Clothing is acts of righteousness, right? So when you're young, It's actions, your clothing. I can dress however I want. I can dress like a pig. I can dress like emo. I can dress goth. I can dress whatever I want. Because you're a kid, you could do whatever you want. But when you get older, you can't dress how you want. You can't. How do you dress? You dress according to, the situation, circumstance. If you're a pastor, you better be dressed like a pastor. Because that's your role, right? If you are a policeman, you got to dress like a policeman. If you're a fireman, you got to dress like a fireman, right? Which means that you are no longer subject to just your own life. Like, that's the difference between me, who has zero missions with anyone in Providence. I have basically, this podcast is my podcast. It belongs to me. That's why no one can tell me what to say and what to do. It's my choice, right? And because I'm not subject to someone who employs me, then I make up my own decisions. And, I pay the price for the bad I do, and I pay the price for the good I do, right? But when you become a head leader, you are subject to your country. You're subject to your headquarters. You're subject to your congregation. And that's why you can't just do whatever you want. And that's why, this John 21:18 says, when you are old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. That's the life of a leader, right? Even though you're tired, you got to go. Even though you don't want to do it, you got to do it. Even though you don't like this person and this person's just always bothering you, but they're in your congregation, you got to meet them. Children live the way they want. And everyone understands why? Because they're children. But when you're an adult, you don't live however you want. The leader lives a life sacrificing, living for others. That's the role you chose. And because you chose that role, you got to live by that role, right? Because, I think about this because I think about myself too. I think about what I should post, right? I don't have a mission. My main life is in social media and YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, right? That's my job, right? And for me is the only things I really post is like food, coffee, and meeting church members, visiting churches, going to exercise, just daily life stuff, right? Because my marketing strategy is my YouTube will be my life. Like, this is like my job where I'm showing, like, this is, as a spiritual, as a pastor, as someone who is doing these types of things, I am going to be, sharing about the gospel, sharing about the Bible and stuff like this too, sharing about the word. And then my Instagram becomes my personal life where people can say that, oh, here's Pastor Sky. Oh, he's always talking about these holy things on YouTube. But if you want to see what his personal life is like, oh, this is what he's like here. It's like, oh, and that's kind of part of marketing strategy where one part of my social media is showing a different part of my life. And one part of social media, which is YouTube, is showing like the work part of the gospel and the things that I talk about, right? So, but in the back of my head, I always wonder, and I think to myself is, am I doing too much? Is it okay to post this? Right? And I think about it too. I do. And so far, in my opinion, so remember, this is just my thinking. I don't think I've posted anything too much. However, I am not against people telling me, it's like, hey, you sure you want to post this? Hey, Pastor, like I've taken down stuff too where they're like, this might offend someone, or this offended someone. Or groups of people, right? If it offends one person, it's a little bit different. But if it's like, maybe this kind of shows the Taiwan church in a bad way. It's like, I don't want to do that, right? Sometimes even on my YouTube channel, remember the time during March when all the craziness happened? During that time, one of my YouTube shorts came out talking about central figures are not perfect and they'll make mistakes. And they're like, oh, this might be bad. And I was like, oh, really? So I took it down. I took it down because that's what, I didn't want to have that type of impact, especially with this, this very extreme special circumstance that came out because of it, right? And I took it down because I was like, I don't want people to think this, right? So yeah, I'm very, very open to it too. So when people tell me certain things, I am very, very open to it. And I would like to hear what people do think about it too. Is it too extreme? Is it too much? If not, what can I do here? What can I do there? But I think one thing that I think most people who do social media probably understand that social media is more about an image, right? So you only show a certain thing you want to show. You don't show the other stuff. So it's almost like YouTube is the stuff that I do, my work stuff, how I think spiritually, whatever these things, and my Instagram shows another different image of what my personal life is like, right? So I do think a lot of people who do social media understand that point, right? So but like I said, if you guys ever have something to say, you can post it in the comments, or you can DM me too, and I'm fine with it too. And even if you post it in public, I'm okay with it too, right? As long as there's not like heavy cursing, swear words, and obscenities thrown my way, I understand. Yeah, because it's I think feedback is a good thing where I can sit there and talk to you guys and say, oh, this is what I think. Oh, really? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind for the next time, kind of thing. So it's very, very interesting. Like being in this situation and, doing social media in this way too. So yeah, that's kind of one of the thoughts I've had. Another thing that I was really, really impressed by while I'm here in Taiwan is just kind of learning how certain things are done here, right? And like some people were giving me ideas, some people were telling me how they would do certain things. And one thing that I learned that I thought was so impressive about, I learned some things like how some people here deal with like do certain things. It really, really impressed me, and I was like, oh, I thought that was one of the best ideas. It was about letter writing. When you write letters and stuff. See, for me, when it comes to letter writing, what I'm used to is I write a letter, I get it translated, or I write it myself, and then I send it through a channel, and that's it. It's done, right? Let's just see what happens. But I heard one person telling me how they do it. And they're like, oh, yeah. And personally, I thought it was one of the best ideas. It might be a little bit difficult, especially if you have like thousands of people. This might not be practical. But one of the people was telling me, like, whenever someone sends a letter to them, they will go over the letter with them to make sure that what they want to convey or what they want to say is actually properly conveyed to Sunsim and stuff, right? I was like, man, there were many times where people misunderstand or don't trust those that send letters, right? And sometimes you're not even sure if it was sent because it's not as transparent or there isn't much communication, right? But it was like, wow, this person does it in such an amazing way where after they receive the letter, they will look at it and they will sit down with that person who sent the letter, make sure that what they really want to say is conveyed. And I think it's a good idea because sometimes we're nervous or we're not sure how to write a letter. So the message doesn't come out very clear, or there's too much detail, or there's no purpose to the letter. But imagine if someone who's been doing letters for so long contacts you and talks to you about that letter. Make sure that your message is conveyed properly. Then you feel like you're part of the process. There's transparency. Then you actually also feel how much they care about you, making sure everything is all right. And I thought it was like, man, that's a great idea. Because, there have been a lot of bad experiences in the past. There have, right? And I'm not going to say this is everyone's experience. This is just my experience, right? It's just my experience. And that's why I'm going to share only with my experience. I'm not going to say that everyone goes through this. I've heard of the complaints, stuff like that. But one time in the past, there was this experience that just left a really bad taste in my mouth. Right? Just left a really bad, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is so terrible. And it made me have less trust in like when it came to like leadership and stuff like that too, right? Like there's one time we had this huge leaders meeting for the first time ever. Leaders from all over the country came over to discuss a certain subject of how we can run the country from this point on. And we started to discuss. And the crazy part is, at the end of 2 days, we came up with a decision that was unanimous. Like, how crazy? Unanimous means every person agreed on that same strategy, which is crazy. Like, how many times have you had all the leaders agree on the exact same strategy? And the answer is, it's probably 0, right? But we had this professional person come in, doing this entire seminar for us. It was awesome. By the end of it, we all agreed on the same strategy. Everyone bought tickets. They spent time, it was just, we were like, wow, we got it done at the end. Like, so months later, so we were wondering why there wasn't a response from Sunstein, because this is huge. Every leader in that country came together and they agreed on a certain strategy. We all agreed to it. And this is all the leaders. So this is something where Sunstein would pay attention to. But 2 months went by. We're like, what's going on? And when we finally asked, even the people that we're asking didn't know, and they had to ask at that point. And what we found out was so discouraging. It was so discouraging because the person that wrote the letter wasn't even attending the entire event, but they reported it. They weren't even there for the whole event. And when we heard this, we were like, dude, that's crazy. And then, of course, people begin to distrust. They distrust the process. We're all wondering what actually happened, what was actually sent, right? There became a lot of distrust in the system, right? And for me personally too, I just had for me, it was such a bad experience for me, but I learned a lot from it, from a bad experience. We got to learn from it too. Because, and of course, part of me is I am the rebel pastor. So I'm going to tell you this and be super honest with you. I didn't handle it very well. I did not handle it well. It was a situation, it was quite interesting because there was me and another pastor organizing this event. And the funniest part was both of us looked at each other and we're like, just watch. Someone is going to come in and just change the schedule without anyone knowing. And they're just going to say to us, oh, we're changing the schedule. And guess what happens? On the second day of the event, someone comes in out of nowhere and just starts giving education and saying this and rebuking us. And they even invited another member who wasn't even a leader to join. And we were sitting there going, see, I told you so. We all knew it. And we're kind of sat there I was so angry. Remember, guys, I'm the rebel pastor, right? So I didn't handle it well. It was crazy because when we heard about this change in schedule, not even everyone in the HQ knew what was going on. And I was so angry at that point because I'm like, did you know? They're like, I had no idea. And okay, guys, just picture this. This is how rebel I am. And I regret this, guys. I said, everyone leave the room except HQ. That's what I said. And I just laid into them. I was so upset, right? I was like, I knew you would do this. We even said this was going to happen. And I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't handle it properly. I shouldn't have said some of the words, right? Of course, it was surprisingly refreshing to say all the things I said, but if I were to do it again, I would do it differently. I definitely would, especially looking at myself now compared to back then. See, if I were to, what would I do differently? Number one is I would definitely pick up chairs, throw them against the wall, turn over the tables like Jesus did in the temple courts. I'm just kidding. Yeah. If I'm going to be honest, I just wouldn't have been so sharp with my words. Even though these were the words that everyone was thinking. But I just wouldn't, I would have done it differently. Yes, I should be much more calmer in that situation, but I didn't handle it well. Yeah, so I'm telling you guys straight up, I didn't handle it well. I was so upset. Everyone else was upset too, but I'm the one, because I'm kind of a rebel, I will take it to another level, and then, it wasn't good. Yeah, I would definitely change the way I did it. But, I'm just telling you guys, this is the stuff that, in the past that breeds distrust, right? And I was going, how would we change? Remember, here, I'm not sitting here saying that this is all bad. It's all part of the process. A lot of us don't know how to make things better. A lot of us are trying to figure out, what's going on and stuff like that too, right? Right? So I was thinking about this makes a lot of sense. For me, it's I went through that, and this my personal experience. Some people may not have had some same experience. Some people have similar experiences too. But the biggest point is not to say, oh, I hate this. This system's terrible. No, the point is, what can we do that's better? And that's why when I listened to one of the leaders in Taiwan and how they dealt with letters, I was like, man, that would help so much. Someone really takes the time, sit down with me, making sure that I know they know exactly what I'm trying to say, and that maybe it could come out wrong. Hey, did you mean this? I'll be like, oh no, I didn't mean. Oh, okay. And I think that is far better. It really, really is. So when I looked at that, I was going, that would be a great way of making things come out better, right? And I thought, that's something that I would probably want to implement myself also. Yeah. You know what? I don't even know why I'm talking about this stuff. I don't know. Why did I talk about this? Well, this stuff was so long ago. We were talking 7, 8, 9 years ago. And, it's all done. And no one's going to be offended, especially the person who crashed the event, because that's someone who's no longer in Providence. That's so sad. It really is sad. Yeah. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, so yeah, I think that's one of the things that I was thinking about because they talked about it, and I'm like, yeah, that's a great idea, and that's something that I would want to implement. But I think it would be harder if it comes down to, it would be harder for a country that has like tens of thousands, because could you really do that with like hundreds of letters at the same time? I think it would be impossible, right? So, I think there would have to be another way to do it, but I think that's a very, very good way of handling it, and it would make people feel more comfortable and more trusting too. Either way. So, yeah, those are a couple of things that were on my mind, and like I'm saying right now, I'm not complaining, and I'm not sitting there saying that, oh my gosh, my life in Providence was terrible, because it's not. I love my life in Providence. So many things God has done in my life, so many things how God has worked through me and worked and helped me in so many different ways. So for me, it's not something where I am like sitting there saying my life in Providence is terrible. It's not. I love my life. I don't know if I'd say I have regrets, but it's more so that I've made mistakes where I look at it and say, wow, I'm never doing that again. Or maybe I've made the same mistake more than once, but I've learned from it and I've realized from it. So it has kind of changed the way that I thought and think too. All right. So there it is, guys. That's today's first segment. Before we get into the foundational figures word study, today's foundational figure is going to be Polycarp of Smyrna. And you guys know Smyrna because that's in Revelation chapter 2 of the 7 churches that Jesus talks about, right? So we're going to go into Polycarp of Smyrna, very, very important person in the early Christian church. And I hope that you guys will enjoy this. So let's get into the first break of the day. So let's get into today's word study. And every Tuesday we have the foundational figures of Christianity word study. And today we're going to go over a very, very important person called Polycarp. Polycarp of Smyrna. Okay? So we're going to figure out what type of person he is. But Smyrna today, Primarily, people know Smyrna today primarily because of an event that happened there. And it was an 86-year-old bishop, pastor of the church of Smyrna. His name was Polycarp, and he was cruelly put to death by fire and sword because he refused to renounce Jesus. Right? So this is Polycarp. So let's go into who he is, okay? So Polycarp was a pastor, bishop, saint, and martyr forever associated with ancient Smyrna. Shortly after his execution and death, somebody, we're not sure who it actually is, wrote a story in a document that is one of the great classics, okay? It's a classic document of early Christianity called The Martyrdom of Saint Polycarp. So it was written in Greek, and it was soon translated into Latin, and it began to circulate throughout the early church, East and West, and it became kind of like a prototype for many other martyr stories that the early church read as a kind of sanctified devotional literature to build them up in the faith and to remind people of the great sacrifice that men and women of faith had given to Jesus. Right? So Polycarp, he was born a slave, according to one tradition, but adopted by a godly woman named Callisto, who taught him to love the scriptures, to memorize them, to pray, and led him to baptism. And we know this because Ignatius of Antioch, another martyr in the early church, passed by Smyrna on his way to Rome, where he would face execution and death for Christ. And he visited with Polycarp in Smyrna and later wrote a letter to Polycarp reminding him of the commitment that young Polycarp had made at his baptism, right? So through his baptism, Ignatius said that you have enrolled in the militia Christi, or the militia of Christ, the army that sheds no blood. So let your baptism endure as your arms, your faith as your helmet, your love as your spear, and your patience as complete panoply, right? So we don't know exactly when the Christian faith came to Smyrna, but most likely it was during the 2-year ministry of Paul in Ephesus. And we know that the gospel began to spread from the city into the countryside because Christianity was initially an urban faith or an urban religion. So there were those emissaries who would call them, today we'd call them evangelists or missionaries, or church planters, pioneers, who took the gospel from Ephesus, went north, and eventually came to Smyrna. Now, Polycarp himself never met Paul, but he knew Paul's writings, quoted them often, and later himself wrote a letter to the church at Philippi. As Paul himself had written the book of Philippians in our New Testament, so Paul was very important to Polycarp, particularly from his writings. But he did know another great apostle, which was Apostle John. He had a personal relationship with John. And how do we know this? Well, Irenaeus, which we talked about 2 weeks ago, the great teacher and bishop of Lyon, is in Lyon, France, was also a native son of Smyrna. And he grew up there in the very shadow of Polycarp, sitting at his feet, just as Polycarp himself had earlier sat at the feet of John. So later, Irenaeus, as an old man, reflects back on these early years in Smyrna, and he remembers something of the visage, the personality, the feel of Polycarp. And he talks about remembering Polycarp sitting in a chair, right? And how he would tilt his head, the sound of gravel in his voice when he spoke, and the weight of his hand on his shoulder when he blessed him. So Polycarp brings together in a unique way 2 great streams of apostolic Christianity, okay? So he was the 2 streams of apostolic Christianity that he brings together, Polycarp brings together, is the Pauline and the Johannine, so Paul and John. So from Paul, Polycarp heard Jesus say, "Will you follow me?" But from John, he heard Jesus say, "Do you love me?" So these 2 questions would shape the life and the ministry and give meaning to the martyrdom of Polycarp. So, we sometimes think of these martyrs as great heroic figures. They were tremendous, courageous people, but there was also substance in their courage and faith. They're not tilting at windmills, right? Polycarp becomes himself kind of a witnessing theologian, right? Not to be sure on the level of theological sophistication as you would find later with, the people that come in the future, but like Polycarp, the substance of, he had that Trinitarian faith from the beginning, and you see it in his opposition to Marcion. And Marcion was a heretic who wanted to rip apart the Old Testament and the New, right? Marcion preached a gospel with no Christmas, and Jesus was not born of Mary. This heretic was going in there preaching this. But he may have passed through... so like this Marcion guy was like, the way that he thought Jesus came about was no natural human birth at all. But in modern theology, the doctrine of the virgin birth has become kind of a sign of believing in the supernatural, right? So back then, they didn't really believe in that, and Marcion was one of those heretics that went against it, right? And went against the deity of Jesus, okay? But in the early church, it arose as a testimony to the humanity of Jesus Christ. He was really born. He was like really born of human, right? And Ignatius of Antioch says, truly, really born of the Virgin Mary. And Polycarp was a witness to that, right? Not witness to him being born, right? But for Ignatius of Antioch, right? And according to the best traditions we have, the only time that Polycarp traveled far away from his hometown of Smyrna is when he went to Rome, and there on the streets of Rome, he encountered Marcion. Now, Marcion asked, do you know who I am? Right? And that's, of course, that's always a dangerous question. But when he says, do you know who I am? Polycarp replied, I know you. You are the firstborn of Satan. No more questions from Marcion, right? That's how serious he really was, right? So to proclaim the God of the Bible, the God of both creation and redemption, of what we call the Old and the New Testament, Polycarp's world was to invite conflict with the dominant power structures of the day, right? And this is why the persecutions came, right? So he's inviting conflict with the people who are leaders, the people in charge of the world, right? So don't get, we can't kind of misunderstand and say that that Christians at this time were violent revolutionaries or like sons of liberty out to overthrow the government. Like, they were not like that. They wanted to be good citizens, and they repeatedly told those in authority, we are willing to pay our taxes. We gladly pray for those in authority, including the emperor. We will pray for the emperor, but we will not pray to the emperor, for we are citizens of another realm. We belong to the ecclesia, the church, and we worship another king who sits on a different throne. Right? And this was kind of the context in which the book of Revelation was written, right? And we think, scholars say that the book of Revelation was written under the reign of the Roman Emperor Domitian. And it wasn't revolution that the Christians were declaring, not in the usual sense of that word like revolution, but it was more subversive. It was a way of saying that Caesar is not everything. There is a divinely appointed distance between the church and the empire, and because the Christians had embraced the Old Testament, they knew the 10 Commandments, especially the first one, which is, there is no other God before me, right? Number one, right? And, basically the Roman state is ordained, the state of the Christian church is ordained by God. And Paul taught in Romans 13 that there was the way that Paul taught was, they are living under this state, not the government state of Rome, right? So it was one day, there was a holiday. And it was game day, like you have in the Colosseum. Okay, so 20,000 bloodthirsty fans of torture and violence had turned out to see the shows. And the violence obviously was by design, right? It's like the entertainment of that time. Smyrna was the epicenter of the Roman spectacle. And up in Pergamum, just a few miles to the north, there was a school for training gladiators. So the program of the day went like this. In the morning, the wild animals were let loose into the arena, hunted down and killed. Later in the day, the gladiators themselves would fight. But in the afternoon, with the sun high in the sky, it was time for the execution of the criminals. So there was a lot of them: slaves, war captives, arsonists, murderers, and those like Polycarp who had committed sacrilege by refusing to honor the godhead of Caesar and who would not take the easy way out, right? So the proconsul said to Polycarp, "Take the oath, I will let you go. Just revile Christ." Polycarp answered, "For 86 years I have been his servant, and he has done me no wrong. And how can I now blaspheme my king who saved me?" He offered a prayer in the name of the triune God, and then he was bound. The wood was lit, And like Jesus, who was crucified naked, Polycarp entered the flames without his clothes. But when they saw that his body would not be burned by the fire, an executioner was called to stab him with a dagger. And so he was killed by fire and sword. The believers gathered the charred bones of Polycarp as a reminder of his faithfulness unto death. And every year on the anniversary of his martyrdom, people would gather to pray and to remember not his death, but his birthday. And that's why they call it his birthday. They did not mourn but rejoice, for martyrdom is the place where sacrifice and joy become inseparable. So about a generation after Polycarp, another great teacher of the very early church, his name is Tertullian, made a famous statement we often remember, and it says, "The blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church," right? And this was true in Polycarp's day, and it's true today, right? We are basically, our churches and our foundation was made by the blood of the martyrs, right? And this is why the Christian church is here today, and this is why we're able to be here in this history too, right? So this is Saint Polycarp of Smyrna, and I hope it's a great story that inspires you and helps us to understand the situation, why we are, why we can live so freely and comfortably as, people who believe in God. We're not being killed like they were in the past, okay? So there it is, guys. That is today's word study for Foundational Figures of Early Christianity. Hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you have any questions or if you have any other people that you want me to go over and need some early Christian leaders, go ahead and leave that in the comments below. All right. So before we get into Health is Happiness, let's move into the second break of the day.
When you lift me up from falling, I feel your warm embrace, breathing life into my withering spirit, pouring out your love and grace. So I think to myself, I'll repay you. Ooh, oh. You pulled me out of darkness so many thousands of times. You gave me strength and courage, everything that I need in life. Look at all the countless blessings, I'll repay you. Ooh, oh. Even if the world forsakes you and they misunderstand what it means to be in providence, holding God's truth in our hands, we fulfill the greatest history, God's will and highest love. All the wondrous miracles you've shown, only here in Providence. Providence, push forward, we'll run till the end. With our solid faith, we'll repay you with all our heart, will and life. Now revealed, you've shared his highest wisdom, valued secrets of how to live. Looking back at all the memories, I'll repay you. Ooh, oh. Even if the world forsakes you and they misunderstand, what a blessing it is that you're here, acting with God hand in hand. We receive the greatest rapture, we've gained eternal joy. This is God's final history, never will it be destroyed. Providence will shine our brightest light for your dreams forsakes you, and they don't understand. We're more than proud to be here, holding God's truth in our hands. We fulfill the greatest history, God's will and highest love. Your words, your precious providence, we'll cherish it till the end. Providence will stand till the end. Providence will live with our God. Providence, love God with our heart, will and life.
Okay, so let's get into today's final segment. And every Wednesday we have Health is Happiness, and we're just getting an amazing series of health tips. Especially the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about preventing injuries by Yuen Yu over there in Singapore. And today, she's going to talk about something very interesting. She's going to talk about her journey as an athlete. Right? Her sporting journey. She's someone who likes to run, and what she's learned by sharing. So this should be very, very inspiring and something that we can all learn from too. So everyone, please welcome all the way over there from Singapore. This is Yuen Yu with Health is Happiness.
Hello everyone, my name is Yuen Yu and I'm from Singapore. I'm currently finishing up my studies in physiotherapy. On today's topic of Health is Happiness, I will be sharing more about my sporting journey and what I've learned. I'd like to give thanks to the Holy Trinity, Pastor Sky and Julius for this opportunity to share. Without further ado, I'll begin. A brief background on my sporting journey thus far is that from primary school to junior college, I did a little bit of gymnastics and played netball for the rest of the time there. But post-junior college onwards, I delved more into strengthening and middle distance running. For strength training wise, I was thankful to get to learn from a strengthening and conditioning coach. And for middle distance running, the reason why I joined or I delved more into it was that through doing netball, I found out that I'm better at running as compared to reading the gameplay and playing netball itself. And I managed to cross paths with various coaches, and I'm currently training with my current track and field coach, and he is an experienced middle distance coach in Singapore. When I first started out middle distance running, the first 1 to 2 years were more of getting adapted to it, learning what it's about, learning the basics. But it was still quite a steep learning curve because my current coach does have the tendency to push his students and want them to improve as much as they can, which is good, right? The intention is good. And during this time, I had the chance to decide whether I wanted to continue to run competitively because training really wasn't easy. After much prayer and discussion with the Trinity, I was deeply inspired that at least for the time of university, I really wanted to run and train competitively. This was because with the challenge of being pushed outside my comfort zone every single training, I really got to learn so much, which I will delve more on it later on. And because of this reason, I knew that God wanted to personally train me through running, and therefore I said yes to training competitively in track, at least for the time I'm in university. For post-university, I do still want to run, but the intensity-wise, I will discuss again with the Trinity. Okay, moving on, I'll share a little bit about the lessons I've learned through running for the past 3+ years. The first lesson I learned was about consistency. Is training easy? No, it really isn't. And majority of the time it's tough. I guess that's why it's called training, right? And in the past 3+ years of training more seriously in running, I've come to face a good share of good times of improvement, times of slower improvement, and also times of plateau or even deterioration. But what I've learned is that as long as you put in effort consistently, even on the days you don't feel as motivated, you still show up, you still get the work done, you will be able to break through and see improvements. Looking back, I recall what Sansinim also shared, which is to do until the end, right? To do it till the end, and that's part of this year's theme. Some proverbs that I found from September 2022, it says that in Revelations chapter 1 verse 8, God says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. This means we need to persevere and do it from start to finish. Another proverb says, if God and the Lord Christ are with you and you do it until the end, you will prevail even if there is only 1% possibility of winning. Also, to better understand this idea of doing it until the end, God worked through one of my teammates to share a word of encouragement that I really needed and really appreciated on a day of training recently, just in the recent weeks, where I was feeling a lot more tired and unmotivated than usual. Logically, I knew that training wouldn't be easy and I just need to persevere, but I still wasn't feeling that motivated. My friend shared with me about this American coach and a retired American athlete. His name is Mark Coogan. So this coach coached this Olympic 10K runner called Alexi Papas, and she set the national record for Greece. So what he said was the rule of thirds. He said that whenever you're chasing a big dream, you're supposed to feel good a third of the time, okay a third of the time, and crappy or not great a third of the time. And if you feel roughly in those ratios, it means that you are in fact chasing a dream. If you feel too good all the time, you're not pushing yourself enough. And if you feel too fatigued, you might be burning out or having a mental health challenge and you need to reevaluate. To maximize your progress towards difficult goals, you should be well outside of your comfort zone enough, also known as feeling lousy a third of the time. Much more than that is risky, and much less than that is lazy. When I heard this, I felt comforted and motivated after having clearer expectations. I knew that training wouldn't be easy, but knowing this, I knew that, okay, the ratios are probably going to be a third feeling good, a third feeling okay, and a third feeling not so good. And for that day, it was likely a day that, I'm not going to feel too good, I'm not going to feel that motivated, but what I need to do is to show up and do what I can, and that's enough. Okay. Moving on to the second lesson that I learned, which is about the value of developing, the value of being good in something. Truly, it's so valuable to develop yourself in areas of your individuality or areas that you're good at. Personally, for me, there are many others who are much better in running, but that isn't the main point, right? I do think that at least within myself, within sports, running is something I find a bit easier to improve in, a bit easier to get the hang of. Therefore, through training in running, through investing time and effort in it, I've learned many valuable lessons about myself, different mentalities, and also lessons about God and this history that I would not have learned if not for running. Some proverbs that I found from May 2020 about individuality, it says that God said that everyone has their own rare characteristic or individuality. For example, having special characteristic in loving God, having a rare character of having a kind heart, or having a strong mentality. If you have discovered your characteristic, then you have to show it well. One of the ways to show it well is to remove dirty things, in other words, sins or bad character. Another proverb says, if you do not have specialty, then you develop yourself a specialty. I'll repeat this again. If you do not have specialty, then you yourself develop a specialty for yourself by taking action. If there is something you do well consistently, if you do it, it will become your specialty. With this, I hope that everyone can also find something that they like or something that you find easier to be better in and develop yourself in the area. It can be a hobby, it can be teaching the word, it can be managing others, and the list goes on. Thirdly, I also learned a lesson about what it means to give your heart, soul, and mind. This builds on the previous point, right? I find that each training that I go for is almost like a miniaturization of life. There's a build-up, there's a climax, and it ends off with a fruit of your efforts. Right? In terms of running, there's a build-up, which is the warm-up, right? The start of your workout is manageable. There is a climax where you feel that, oh my gosh, can I even do it? This is very uncomfortable. I want to give up, but I'll push on. And there's a fruit of your efforts. Physically, you get stronger. Mentally, you find a stronger mentality. Spiritually, maybe you might realize something about yourself, something that you've been praying about, or something about God. Through running, I find that I get to experience this, and I get to experience what it means to give all of your heart and your life to push yourself and finish the training. I think this relates very well to what it says in the Bible, right? Matthew 22:37. Jesus replied about what is the greatest commandment, and he said, "Love the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your mind." I find that through running, it really pushes me to know that it's very possible to push yourself to your limits, and that what you think is your limit might not be your actual limit. And beyond this, being able to give my all through running inspires me to want to do the same in other aspects of my life. And I find that very inspiring for myself. Okay, moving forward, I'll be training for upcoming 10 kilometers road race and a 5 and 10 kilometer track race in the next 2 months. I will aim and I'll strive to continue to do my best. And I really hope to give thanks to God, because through track, He has trained me and He has taught me so many things. I hope that through doing my best in these races and the trainings leading up to it, that I can also give thanks to God for all that He has done for me. Thank you all for listening to my story. I'm very thankful for God, for He has taught me through these experiences, and I wish the same for everyone, the best in all they do, that God can speak to everyone through the things that they're working on. And I hope that everyone can continue striving our best in all that we do. Take care and goodbye.
And thank you so much, Yuen Yu, for sharing your wonderful story and your journey in sport. I think it's something that, we've been talking about this for the last month or so, is we really need to share our testimonies. There's so much going on. In tomorrow's podcast, I will be sharing a testimony from a member over there in Germany. So I hope you guys are going to enjoy it. If you have any testimonies, go ahead. You can record them, send them to me, and I will post them too. Okay? So there it is, guys. That is today's Wednesday podcast. Hope you guys super enjoyed it as much as I have. Please enjoy your services tonight. Make sure you pray for all your leaders. And we'll see you guys again tomorrow on the Morning Star Drive on 117.8.
It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when I'm